Paradise Found, the Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, a study of the prehistoric world, by William F. Warren, S.T.D. LL.D. President of Boston University, corporate member of the American Oriental Society, author of several books, The True Key to Ancient Cosmology and Mythical Geography, etc., with original illustrations. This is the 6th edition. On the left here we have a diagram illustrating the true key to ancient cosmology and mythical geography, and it gives an indication of, or a hint to compare this with page 47. Probably wondering who was William Fairfield Warren when he was at home. And here is information on him. Highly qualified, went to different universities, made himself highly qualified and well known. After 1873, he became a professor of comparative theology and philosophy of religion, and he published these books. He went on to Boston University, and he wrote this book, Cradle of the Human Race, which we're looking at. Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole. Warren wrote a book promoting his belief that the original centre of mankind once sat at the North Pole, entitled Paradise Found, the Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, 1885. In this work, Warren placed Atlantis at the North Pole, as well as the Garden of Eden, Mount Meru, also known as Sumeru, Sumeru or Mahameru, is the sacred five-peaked mountain of Hindu, Jain and Buddhist cosmology, and is considered to be the centre of all the physical, metaphysical and spiritual universes. Avalon, a mythical island featured in the Arthurian legend, King Arthur. It first appeared in Geoffrey of Monmouth's 1136 Historia Regum Britanniae as a place of magic where King Arthur's sword Excalibur was made, and later where Arthur was taken to recover from being gravely wounded. Hyperborea. In Greek mythology, the Hyperboreans were a mythical people who lived in the far northern part of the known world. Their name appears to derive from the Greek, which means beyond Boreas, even though some scholars prefer a derivation of that, or derivation of that. And he makes a statement here: to locate the axis mundi, or cosmic axis of ancient legends, Igid de Russell, Minsul, and Atlas, pillar had to be in the far north at the top of the world. To locate these in right mutual relations, one must begin by representing to himself the Earth as a sphere, or spheroid, and is situated within and concentric with the starry sphere, each having its axis perpendicular and its north pole at the top. The pole star is thus in the true zenith, and the heavenly heights centering about it are the abode of the supreme god or gods. And then he talks about Homer, Virgil and Hesiod. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, an Indian nationalist and historian, quotes extensively from this book, The Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, and presents his own studies of Vedas and Persian Avesta in his book, The Arctic Home in the Vedas, arguing for the presence of ancient humans in the Arctic. Here's a diagram illustrating the true key to an ancient cosmology, which we've already looked at, and there is the writer and the claimant himself. We found more information, but it's basically the same, maybe just more extensive. At the Public Domain Review, Paradise Found, the Cradle of the Human Race at the North Pole, probably published about 1885. It's basically the same book. We actually thought it was a YouTube video, but it turned out to be a book. And it states, this book is not the work of a dreamer, neither has it proceeded from a love of learned paradox, nor yet it is a cunningly devised fable aimed at particular tendencies in current science, philosophy or religion. It is a thoroughly serious and sincere attempt to present what is to the author's mind the true and final solution of one of the greatest and most fascinating of all problems connected with the history of mankind. That this true solution has not been furnished before is not strange. The suggestion that primitive Eden was at the Arctic Pole seems at first sight the most incredible of all wild and willful paradoxes, and it is only within the lifetime of our own generation, or his particular generation at that time, that the progress of geological discovery has relieved the hypothesis of fatal antecedent improbability. Moreover, when one considers the enormous variety and breadth of the fields from which its evidences of truth must be derived, when one remembers how recent are those comparative sciences on whose results the argument must chiefly depend, when one observes that many of the most striking of our alleged proofs, both in go to the other books so I can see this. It's basically just his preface and he rambles on. So I'm going to jump that. A few pages long. Table of contents. Table of contents continued. And continued more. And yet again. Illustrations. Key to ancient cosmology, to the world of Homer. First part, location of Eden, state of the question. Chapter 1, results of the explorers, historic and legendary. 2, results of the theologians. 3, results of non-theological scholars, naturalists, ethnologists, archaeologists, etc. And there's a quote here. You shall understand that no mortal may approach to that paradise, for by land no man may go, for wild beasts that are in the deserts, and for the high mountains and great huge rocks that no man may pass by, for the dark places that are there. And by the rivers may no man go, for the water runs so roughly and so sharply, because it comes down so outrageously from the high places above, that it runs in so great waves that no ship may row or sail against it. And the water roars so and makes so huge a noise and so great a tempest that no man may hear another in the ship, though he cried with all the might he could. Many great lords have essayed with great will many times to pass by those rivers towards paradise with full great companies, but they might not speed in their voyage, and many died for weariness of rowing against the strong waves, and many of them became blind, and many deaf from the noise of the water, and some perished and were lost in the waves, so that no mortal man may approach to that place without the special grace of God. Sir John de Mandeville. Chapter 1. The results of explorers, historic and legendary. And it has a quote there in German by K.H.W. Volker. One of the most interesting and pathetic passages to be found in all literature is that in which Christopher Columbus announces to his royal patrons his supposed discovery of the ascent to the gate of the long-lost Garden of Eden. With what emotions must his heart have thrilled as, staring up this ascent, he felt his ships smoothly rising toward the sky, the weather becoming milder as he rose. To be so near the paradise of God's own planting, to be the first discoverer of the way in which the believing world could at length, after so many ages, once more approach its sacred precincts, even if forbidden to enter. What an exquisite experience it must have been to the lonely spirit of that great explorer. It is his third voyage. He is the Gulf of Paria to the north. He is in the Gulf of Paria to the north of or northwest of the mouth of the Orinoco. In his loyal epistle to Ferdinand and Isabella, it's the King and Queen of Spain, he wrote, the Holy Scriptures record that our Lord made the earthly paradise and planted in it the tree of life, and thence sprang a fountain from which the four principal rivers of the world take their source, namely the Ganges in India, the Tigris and Euphrates in the Nile. The author did not find, nor ever had found, any account by the Romans or Greeks which fixes in a positive manner the site of the terrestrial paradise. Neither has he seen it given in any map mundi laid down from authentic sources. Some placed it in Ethiopia at the sources of the Nile, but others traversing all these countries found neither the temperature nor the altitude of the sun correspond with their ideas respecting it. Nor did it appear that the overwhelming waters of the deluge had been there. Some pagans pretended to adduce argument to establish that it was in the Fortunate Islands, now called the Canaries, or the Canary Islands. Saint Isidore, Bede and Strabo, there's a footnote indication there, while freed Strabus of Reichmann, Bede. So that must be a German writer, it's a reference to his book, to find that information. Saint Ambrose and Scotus and all the learned theologians agree that earthly paradise is in the east, and the author had already described his ideas concerning this hemisphere and its form. See the appendix section 1, footnote at the bottom. And he had no doubt that if he could pass below the equinoctial line after reaching the highest point of which he had spoken, he should find a much milder temperature and a variation in the stars and in the water. Not that he supposed that elevated point to be navigable, nor even that there is water there. Indeed, he believed it impossible to ascend thither, because he was convinced that it was the spot of the earthly paradise where no one can go, but without God's permission. But this land which your highness have now sent me to, he's talking about the king and the queen, to explore is very extensive, and he thought that there were many other countries in the south of which the world has never any knowledge. Didn't have any knowledge of it. No one knew about it. He didn't suppose that the earthly paradise was in the form of a rugged mountain, as the descriptions of it have been made to appear, but that it was on the summit of the spot which he had described as being in the form of the stalk or stem end of a pear. The approach to it from a distance must be by a constant and gradual ascent. But he believes that, as he had already said, or he mentions, no one could ever reach the top, and he thought also that the water he describes, may proceed from it, though it be far off and stopping at the place he has just left. It forms this lake. There are great indications of this being the terrestrial paradise, for its situation coincides with the opinions of the holy and wise theologians, of whom he had mentioned, and moreover the other evidences agree with the supposition, for the author had never either read or heard of fresh water coming in so large a quantity in close conjunction with the water of the sea. The idea is also corroborated by the blandness of the temperature, and if the water of which he spoke did not proceed from the earthly paradise, it seemed to him to be a still greater wonder, for he did not believe that there was any river in the world so large and deep. When he left the Dragon's Mouth, which is the northernmost of the two straits which he had described, he's already described, and which he so named, probably in the preface, which he so named on the day of their Lady of August, and footnote indication reads the Feast of the Assumption. The author found that the sea ran so strongly to the westward that between the hour of Mass, probably 6 a.m. according to the footnote, when the church started, when he weighed anchor, and the hour of compliance, there was 9 p.m, footnote 3, 9 p.m, he made 65 leagues of 4 miles each, and not only was the wind not violent, but on the contrary very gentle, which confirmed to him in that conclusion that in sailing southward there was a continuous ascent, while there is a corresponding descent towards the north. And he held it for certain that the waters of the sea moved from east to west with the sky, and that in passing this tract they held a more rapid course, and had therefore eaten away large tracts of land, and hence had resulted this great number of islands. Indeed, these islands themselves afford an additional proof of it, for on the one hand all those which lie west and east, or a little more obliquely, northwest and southwest, are broad, while those which lie north and south, or north, east and south west, that is in a directly contrary direction to the said winds, and so forth. And then he returns the subject to the land of Gracia, and of the river and lake found there, which later on he claims might properly be called a sea. For a lake is but a small expanse of water, which, when it becomes great, deserves the name of a sea, just as we speak of the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. And then he started to think that if the river mentioned does not proceed from the terrestrial paradise, it comes from an immense tract of land situated in the south, of which hitherto no knowledge has been obtained. And then he talks more. Alas, for the hope of settling the problem of Eden's site by actual exploration. Columbus never lived to find his paradise, and geographers have long ago ascertained that the golden summit of the world is not in Venezuela, nor in any of its neighbour states. Of course, Columbus supposed himself to be off the eastern coast, not of a new continent, but of Asia. His idea of the location of the terrestrial paradise as in or to the eastward of Father India was the prevailing idea of his age, of his era. The Hereford map of the world, dating from the 13th century, represents the favoured spot as a circular island to the east of India. And as separated from the mainland not only by the sea, but also by a battle-mented wall with its one gate to the west, through which our first parents were supposed to have been expelled. Hugo de Saint Victor wrote, "Paradise is a spot in the Orient productive of all kinds of woods and pomeriferous trees. It contains the tree of life. There is no cold nor heat there, but perpetually an equable temperature. It contains a fountain which flows forth in 4 rivers." So Gautier de Metz, in a poem written in the 13th century, describes a terrestrial paradise as situated in an unapproachable region in Asia, surrounded by flames and guarded at its only gate by an armed angel. In the year 1322, Sir John de Mandeville made his memorable pilgrimage to the east. In his account of these travels, after describing the marvellous kingdom of Prester John in India, he says, "And beyond the land and isles and the deserts of Prester John's lordship, and going straight towards the east, men find nothing but mountains and great rocks, and there is a dark region where no man may see, neither by day nor by night, as they of the country say. And that desert and that place of darkness lasts from this coast until terrestrial paradise, where Adam, our first father, and Eve were put, who dwelt there but a little while, and that is towards the east and at the beginning of the earth." Of paradise he could not speak properly, for he was not there. It was far beyond, and he repented not going there. He was sad, he was sorrowful that he didn't go there, thinking he was not worthy. And more information on that. Okay, it looks like he's looking at scriptures as well. In the highest place of paradise, exactly in the middle, is a well that casts out 4 streams which run by diverse lands, of which the first is called Pishon, or Ganges, that runs throughout India, or Imlak, in which river and many precious stones and much lignum alloys and much sand of gold. And the other river is called Nile, or Gison, which goes through Ethiopia and after through Egypt. And the other is called Tigris, which runs by Assyria and by Armenia the Great. And the other is called Euphrates, which runs through Armenia and Persia. And men there beyond say that all the sweet waters of the world above and beneath. Take their beginning from the well of paradise, and out of that well all waters come and go. Footnote indication. Early Travels in Palestine, edited by Thomas Wright, London, 1848, page 276. They take the beginning from the well of paradise, all waters take the beginning from the well of paradise, and out of that well all waters come and go. Various writers and map makers of the same age seem very evidently to have identified the paradise of Genesis with the island of Ceylon. Even to this day, a mountain near the centre of the island in his day bears the name of Adam's Peak. According to Mohammedan tradition, or Islamic tradition, because they were Mohammedans originally, right? They didn't become Islam. This was the only so called because it was the place where Adam alighted when cast out of the true celestial paradise in heaven. Nevertheless, Christian tradition or legend long lingered about Ceylon as the genuine site of primitive Eden. So what he's talking about there is that paradise was up in heaven and then it was brought to earth. Something like that. It ended up being located at Ceylon. In entire accord with this view is the remarkable story of Prince Eirik, as told in the Icelandic saga of the 14th century. Mr. Baring Gold, in a style not very reverent, has summarised the tale as follows. Okay, and there's a footnote indicated here. Even Mounteville, whose paradise, as we have seen, was still farther to the east, found here a fountain of youth whose head spring was in paradise. Toward the head of that forest is the city of Colombo, and above the city is a great mountain, also clept Palombi, or maybe that's called. And of that mountain, the city has his name, and more information about that. And more information. Danish Iraq, deterred by the prospect of an encounter with some monster. It's a dragon who guarded a stone bridge. Refused to advance and even endeavoured to persuade his friend to give up the attempt to enter paradise as hopeless. After that they had come within sight of the favoured land. But the Norsemen deliberately walked sword in hand into the maw of the dragon, and the next moment, to his infinite surprise and delight, found himself liberated from the gloom of the monster's interior and safely placed in paradise. So this guy went up and fought this dragon and killed it, and then went across into paradise. After all this, Eirik then retraced his steps to India, unmolested by the dragon, which did not affect any surprise at having to disgorge him, and indeed which seems to have been, notwithstanding his looks, but a harmless and passive dragon. So did he get swallowed or something, and then he... Okay, he was unmolested by the dragon. After a tedious journey of 7 years, Eirik reached his native land, where he related his adventures to the confusion of the heathen and to the delight and edification of the faithful. And in the 10th year, and at break of day, as Eirik went to prayer, God's spirit caught him away, and he was never seen again in this world. So here ends all we have to say of him. And it sounds very Enochish, or Enochish. It sounds too good to be true. It sounds very mythical, but he believes this to be true, not a silly made up fairy tale, right? The results of theologians. Some have placed the Garden of Eden in the third heaven, some in the fourth, in the heaven of the moon, in the moon itself, on a mountain near the lunar heaven, in the middle region of the air, out of the earth, upon the earth, beneath the earth, in a place that is hidden and separated from man. It has been placed under the northern pole in Tartary, or in the place now occupied by the Caspian Sea. Others placed it in the extreme south, in the land of fire. Others in the Levant, or Near East, or on the shores of the Ganges in India, or in the island of Ceylon. It has been placed in China, or in an accessible region beyond the Black Sea, by others in America, in Africa, etc. Bishop Hewitt. Theologians, Christians and Jews have in all ages differed and irreconcilably differed as to the location of the cradle of the human race. The evidences of this are so well known, or so easily accomplished, or so easily accessible to every intelligent reader, that they need not be adduced in this place. Okay, footnote below. See McClintock and Strong, Encyclopedia of Biblical, Theological and Ecclesiastical Literature, Arts, Eden and Paradise. The fathers and theologians of the early churches in the Middle Ages held many curious and conflicting opinions upon the subject. Some, following the allegorizing method of Philo, interpret the whole narrative in Genesis as a parable setting forth spiritual things. Eden was not a place but a state of spiritual blessedness. The four rivers were not rivers but the four cardinal virtues, etc. The majority, however, held to the historic character of the narrative and to the strictly geographical reality of Eden. To the question of its location, numberless were the answers. Often it was in the far east, beyond all lands inhabited by men. Sometimes it was thought of as perhaps within or under the earth, in the regions of the dead. Sometimes it was neither on nor below the earth, but high above it, in the third heaven, or some way associated with the lunar orbit. Again, it would be stated that there are two paradises, a celestial and a terrestrial one, the one in heaven and the other on the earth. Tertullian, conceiving of the torrid zone as the flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life, Genesis 3:24, placed Eden beyond it in the southern hemisphere. Now it was at the bottom of the sea, footnote indication below. In some legends, Eden was submerged by the earliest deluge that covered the mount. The happy garden was believed to be lying at the bottom of Lake Van in Armenia. Gerald Massey, The Natural Genesis, Volume 2, page 231. Now it was at the bottom of the sea, where again it held a position midway between earth and heaven. Anon, it was on the summit of a miraculous mountain which rose to the height of the moon. Of this mountain only the base was washed when by the waters of the deluge all over the mountains. All other mountains were covered, and so forth. Everyone had their different claims and their different ideologies. Where was it? Where was paradise? Luther, in his own brusque way, rejected all attempts to locate this primeval garden, declaring that the deluge had so changed the face of the earth and the course of its original rivers that all searches for Garden of Eden was pointless or fruitless. Calvin, on the contrary, confidently affirmed that the writer of the Genesis narrative must be understood as located in the Garden of Eden, near the mouths of the Euphrates. Soon, this original diversity of Protestant teachings upon the subject became aggravated by new theories, some of them suggested by orthodox ingenuity, some introduced by rationalist conceptions of the semi-mythical character of the Bible, until at the present time the state of the theological teaching respecting Eden is, if possible, a worse Babel than in any preceding age. For a partial illustration of the confusion, one has only to turn to the most recent and authoritative biblical, theological, and religious encyclopedias. In McClintock and Strong's, the writer on Eden inclines it in Armenia, located in Armenia. In Smith's Bible Dictionary, the problem is abandoned as probably insoluble. In the great German encyclopedia of Herzog, it is declared necessary to deny to the story of Eden a strictly historical character. It is a bit of mythical geography. In the supplement, however, Pressel makes an elaborate argument of many pages in favour of the location at the junction of the Tigris and Euphrates. Dorman, in Schenkel's Hebrew lexicon, places it in the Himalayas north of India. In the chief Roman Catholic encyclopedia, Wetzel and Valter's Kirchen lexicon, the writer vacillates between Eastern Asia, taking in a vague and undefined sense, and an equally undefined north. In Lichtenberg's just completed, or at era, in his age, this author's day, Encyclopedia de Sciences Religieuses, the whole story in Genesis 2 is declared a philosophic myth. Professor Brown of New York, in the new work edition, or new work edited at that time of this author's time, in his day, by Dr. Scaff, on the basis of Herzog, enumerates such a variety of opinions advocated by others, but refrains from expressing any opinion of his own. Such is all the light which contemporary theology seems able to throw up on a problem. But here some plain reader of the Bible opens at the second chapter of Genesis and reads, "And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed." And the plain reader asks how a believer in the Bible can doubt that this passage fixes the location of the garden somewhere to the east of Palestine. But looking a little more critically, our inquirer himself quickly sees that the verse does not necessarily affirm anything as to the direction of the garden from the writer. It may naturally mean that the garden was planted in the eastern part of the land of Eden, wherever that was, and turning to find most careful and orthodox commentators, he finds that not a few take this view of it. Moreover, Mekedem, here translated eastward, may be otherwise translated as it is in the King James Version. In the passages Psalms, in the book of Psalms, and elsewhere, in fact in the Vulgate it is here translated a principio, in or from the beginning. Among the early Greek translators, Symmachus, Theodotion, and Aquila understand the term in the same way. Hence, nearly 200 years ago, the learned Thomas Burnet wrote as follows: "Some have thought that the word Mekedem, Genesis 2:8, was to be rendered in the east or eastward, or translated as the east or eastward, as we read it, and therefore determine the site of paradise. But 'tis is only the Septuagint translate it so well. But only 'tis is weird. It's got but a comma then a T. It's only the Septuagint translates so. All the other Greek versions and Saint Jerome, the Vulgate, the Chaldean paraphrase, and the Syriac render it from the beginning or in the beginning, or to that effect. And we that do not believe that the Septuagint, he also didn't believe that the Septuagint to be infallible, inspired, and had no reason to prefer this single authority above all the rest. The same writer says again, we may safely say that none of the Christian fathers, Latin or Greek, ever placed paradise in Mesopotamia. That is a conceit and innovation of some modern authors, which hath been encouraged of late, because it gave more ease and rest as to further inquiries in an argument they could not well manage. Okay, well, it actually was located in the Near East, Mesopotamia, etc., unless everything was one great landmass. And as one of our other videos showed, Israel was actually part of Africa until the tectonic plates shifted and caused earthquake and split and molten lava, etc. volcanoes to erupt, and then you had land divisions, right? As you have them today. As to the new source of evidence opened up by the decipherment of the cuneiform inscriptions, Lenormand said that in none of these, so far as yet deciphered, at that time in his day, has anything been found indicating that the Chaldeo-Babylonians believed that their country was the cradle of the human race. Okay, and it's got a footnote number 3, The Origins of History, Paris 1882. Page 120. Okay. The translator, native-born Aramaic-speaking translator from Mesopotamia, Syria, Victor N. Alexander, states, shows in the original Tab Eshet, the original Tab Eshet Old Testament manuscripts in the sacred scribal language of God, spoken by God, Ishana Atikas Prayer, that's where everything started. The Middle East, the Near East, Mesopotamia, Syria, in that region. But the 4 rivers, says our inquirer, and he reads verses Genesis 1:10-14. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted and became into 4 heads, or 4 tributaries. The name of the first is Pison, or Pishon, and the name of the second river is Gihon, or Gishon, and the name of the third river is Hiddekel, and the 4th river is Euphrates. So it would be the Tigris and Euphrates. Surely here in the 4th river we have one understandable landmark. However impossible it may be satisfactory really to identify all 4 of the primitive rivers of Eden, the mention of the Euphrates at least restricts the location of the garden to some part of the region drained by that river. Consulting the theologians, however, our investigator finds a great variety of serious objections urged against this short and easy method of setting the controversy. First, he is told that some biblical critics have expressed doubt as to the genuineness of the verses, and that as earnest a defender of the Bible as Mr. Granville Penn considered the whole passage an interpolation. So it looks like a lot of people were undecided where it actually was. Oh, it's there. No, it's here. No, it's over there. Hitherto, then, the results of the theologians as to the location of Eden are purely negative and mutually destructive. It would be difficult, says one of their number, to find any subject in the whole history of opinion which has so invited and at the same time so completely baffled conjecture as this. Theory after theory has been advanced, but none has been found which satisfies the required conditions. The site of Eden will ever rank with the quadrature of the circle and the interpretation of unfulfilled prophecy among those unsolved and perhaps insoluble problems which possess so strange a fascination. And that's from William A. Wright of Trinity College, Cambridge, and Smith's Dictionary of the Bible, ART and Eden. Chapter 3, the results of non-theological scholars, naturalists, ethnologists, etc. The location of the cradle of the human race is as much a problem for the ethnologist and anthropologist as it is for the theologian. The archaeologist, the zoologist, and even the biologist, if at all broad and philosophical in their inquiries, cannot ignore the higher interest of their questions. Was there for the human race one primitive centre of distribution, and if so, where was it located? 30 years prior to this particular book being written and published, the pretentious American work by Knott and Glidden, entitled The Types of Mankind, published in Philadelphia and London, 1854. Or maybe one of them was from Philadelphia, the other one was from London. Not really sure on that one. The Types of Mankind, a work written in opposition to the doctrine of the unity of the human race, attracted unusual attention to the former of these questions. The teaching therein put forth was that there are many types of varieties of men without genealogical connection with each other, and that therefore a great number of primitive centres of distribution must be assumed. The avowed prejudices of the projects of the work against certain races, particularly the Africans, would have rendered the influence of the work upon the scientific world extremely slight, but not contributions of some value from Dr. S.G. Morton and the avowed prejudices of the projectors of the work against certain races, particularly the African, would have rendered the influence of the work upon the scientific world extremely slight, had not contributions of some value from Dr. S.G. Morton and Professor Louis Agassiz had been incorporated with it. It mentions something on Darwinism or Darwin, if you're a Darwinist. Part 2, a new hypothesis. The hypothesis and its admissibility. 2, its effect upon the problem and its solution. Would that be in finding the Garden of Eden? Chapter 1, the hypotheses. From the foregoing chapters, it would seem as if nearly every imaginable site for the Gan Eden of Genesis has been proposed, examined and found unavailable. One, however, remains a region of rarest interest in astronomical, physical and historical geography, the natural centre of the only historic hemisphere. Considering the fascination of the subject and the inexhaustible ingenuity that has been expended upon it, it seems remarkable that it should be left to the closing years of the 19th century to bring forward and seriously to test the proposition that the cradle of the human race, the Eden of primitive tradition, was situated at the North Pole and a country submerged at the time of the deluge or the Great Flood. Footnote indication. 1. As to the alleged newness of the above hypothesis, it is proper to say that something like a year elapsed after its full acceptance and public announcement by the writer before he could find any evidence that it had ever been entertained or advocated by any other person. He then met with the illusion in the passage quoted from Bishop Hewitt as a motto to chapter to a second chapter of the preceding part, and with a similar allusion in an anonymous article in Dickens All the Year Round. Whether these were more than rhetorical flourishes, he was long in doubt. Not until after the manuscript of the present work had been completed, packed and addressed to the publishers, was the doubt resolved by finding in an anonymous English magazine article of more than 30 years ago this brief statement: Pastellus will have it that the paradise was under the North Pole. Who Pastellus was and what he wrote upon the subject remain to be investigated. Suffice to say that up to the date of this writing, this particular book, the author has found no book or tract date in which the above hypothesis has ever been advocated. This fact renders some of the mottos prefixed to the chapters further on remarkably significant and impressive. In many cases, the authors express truths which they themselves did not perceive. Chapter 2. Important new features at once introduced into the problem of the site of Eden. Significance of these for a valid solution.